Chapter 13 of The Secret Passage. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read for you today by Dawn Larson in Minnesota. The Secret Passage by Fergus Hume, Chapter 13. Juliet at Bay. Caranby's reply took away Jennings' breath. The case was one of surprises, but he was not quite prepared for such an announcement. He was in the brougham and driving toward the Avon Hotel with the old nobleman before he found his tongue. "What can Mrs. Octagon have to do with Maraquito?" he asked, amazed. "Ah, that is the question," replied Caranby, affording no clue. "I did not even know she was acquainted with her. Perhaps she gambles." "Even if she did, Maraquito's salon would hardly be the place she would choose for her amusement. Moreover, Maraquito does not receive ladies. She has no love for her own sex." "What woman has?" murmured Caranby ironically. Then he added after a pause, "You know that Mrs. Octagon was present when Emilia fell from the plank in the Rexton house?" "Yes, she gave evidence at the inquest, I understand. But Selina did not, if Cuthbert informed me right." "Selina was ill in bed. She could not come. Afterwards she went abroad. I have often wondered," added Caranby, "why Selina didn't seek me out when the death broke my engagement to Emilia. She loved me, and her father being dead, there would have been no bar to our marriage. As it was, she threw over her American and dedicated herself to a hermit's life at Rexton." "You never saw her again?" "Never. I started to travel and came to London only at rare intervals. I did write to Selina asking her to see me, but she always refused, so I became philosophic and took to celibacy also." "Very strange," murmured Jennings, his thoughts elsewhere. "But this does not explain Mrs. Octagon's visit to the house." "I'm not so sure of that, if you mean Maraquito's house. Mrs. Octagon may know, as I do, that Maraquito is the niece of Emilia." "Are you sure of that?" asked the detective eagerly. "As sure as I am that she is no Spaniard, nor even a Spanish Jewess, as she claims to be. She doesn't even know the language. Her name, to fit a woman, should terminate in a feminine manner. She should be called Maraquita, not Maraquito. That little grammatical error doubtless escaped her notice. But, as I was saying, Maraquito, we will still call her, may have sent for Mrs. Octagon." "Mrs. Octagon, so far as I have seen, is not the woman to obey such a call," said Jennings grimly. "Maraquito may have compelled her to come." "For what reason?" "Well, you see, Emilia was said by Isabella Loach, Mrs. Octagon that is, to have fallen from the plank, but Mrs. Octagon may have pushed her off." "May have murdered her, in fact." "Quite so. Isabella loved me, and was, and is, a very violent woman. It may be that she pushed Emilia off the plank, and Maraquito, through her dead father, may have learned the truth. This would give her a hold over Mrs. Octagon." "But Selina may have killed Emilia. That would explain her hermit life, inexplicable in any other way." "No," said Caranby in a shaking voice. "I am sure the woman I loved would never have behaved in that way. Isabella killed Emilia, if it was a murder, and then threatened to denounce Selina unless she gave up the idea of marrying me. And that," added Caranby, as though struck by a new idea, "may be the cause why Selina never answered my letter, and always refused to see or marry me. She may have been, no, I am sure she was, under the thumb of Isabella. Now that Selina is dead, Isabella is under the thumb of Maraquito." "This is all theory," said Jennings impatiently. "We can only theorize in our present state of uncertainty," was the reply of the nobleman. "But my explanation is a reasonable one." "I do not deny that, But why should Maraquito send for Mrs. Octagon? Why? Echoed Caranby in surprise. In order to stop the marriage with Cuthbert. Maraquito loves Cuthbert and hates Juliet. I dare say this is the solution of Mrs. Octagon's strange behavior since the death. It is Maraquito who is stopping the marriage by threatening to denounce Mrs. Octagon for the murder of her aunt. Juliet knows this, and hence her reticence. It might be so, murmured Jennings, more and more perplexed. But Miss Saxon won't be reticent with me. I'll see her tomorrow. What means will you use to make her speak? I'll tell her that Cuthbert may be arrested for the crime. You know he was about the place on the night of the murder. Yes, he went down to look after a possible ghost. But I hope you will not bring Cuthbert into the matter unless it is absolutely necessary. I don't want a scandal. Rest easy, Lord Caranby. I have the complete control of this affair, and I'll only use Cuthbert's presence at Rexton to make Miss Saxon speak out. But then she may not be keeping silence for Cuthbert's sake, as she can't possibly know he was at Rexton on that night. My own opinion is that she's shielding her brother." "Do you suspect him?" asked Caranby quickly. "He may not be guilty of the crime, but he sure knows something about it, that I am sure." Here Jennings related how Clancy had said Basil would speak out if pressed too hard. Now Basil for some reason is in difficulties with Hale, who is a scoundrel. But Basil knows something which Hale and Clancy wish to be kept silent. Hale has been using threats to Basil, and the young man has turned restive. Clancy, who is by no means such a fool as he looks, warned Hale tonight. Therefore I take it that Basil has some information about the murder. Miss Saxon knows he has, and she's shielding him. But Clancy, Hale, and Mrs. Hearn were all out of the house when the woman was stabbed," said Caranby. "They cannot have had anything to do with it." "Quite so, on the face of it, but that bell," Jennings broke off. "I don't think those three are so innocent as it appears. However, Mrs. Hearn is coming back to Hampstead next week. I'll see her and put questions." "Which she will not answer," said Caranby dryly. "Besides, you should have put them to her at the inquest." "The case had not developed so far. I had not so much information as I have now," argued Jennings. "Did you examine Mrs. Hearn at the inquest?" "No, she gave her evidence." Jennings hesitated. "She also wore a veil when she spoke, and refused to raise it on account of weak eyes. By the way, do you notice that Maraquito uses a strong scent?" "Yes, Clancy and Hale also use it." "Ha!" said Jennings, surprised. "I never knew that. Decidedly I am growing stupid. Well, Mrs. Hearn uses that scent also. It is a rare scent." Then Jennings told what Susan Grant had said. "Now I think there is some significance in that scent which is connected with the association of Clancy, Hale, Maraquito, and Mrs. Hearn." "But Mrs. Hearn doesn't know Maraquito." "I am not so sure of that. Susan Grant thinks she may be Maraquito's mother, she is so like her in an elderly way. Did you know this Mrs. Saul?" "No, I knew the brother who came to speak to me after the death of his sister, and who afterwards was put in jail for coining. His wife I never met. I never even heard of her. But Maraquito takes after her father in looks, and he was like Amelia." "It is a difficult matter to unravel," said Jennings. "I think Mrs. Hearn refused to raise her veil at the inquest, so that the likeness between her and Maraquito might not be observed." "I was there, and if Mrs. Hearn is what I say, she would have been put on the guard by Maraquito. Though to be sure," added Jennings, in a vexed tone, "Maraquito did not know then, and perhaps does not know now, that I am a detective." "Ha! Clancy and Hale will have enlightened her," said Caranby, as the vehicle stopped. "Will you not come in?" "Not to night. I will do myself the honor of calling on you